Hello.
Yeah, so conversations about integrity with Bastian Küntzel, let's be formal.
Let's be.
Um, and I've been really looking forward to speaking to you as well.
Thank you.
I start with a little introduction to those who don't know you,
Okay.
or those who don't know you, and then we can dive in. So I speak with Bastian, who is a friend I've met. I think we met in 2003 when I was running for the NGR thing, and I started studying intercultural communications in Chemnitz, which feels very ironic at the moment.
Yes.
And you were already studying there.
Yes, I started in 2002 there, so I was already very experienced.
Yes. And you were also already working in CISV for a while, I think, or active in some way in the junior branch.
Yes.
Yes. And today, Bastian, sorry, it's really difficult for me to say your full name, has many hats and operates in very different spaces, but the themes that run through all of them are the intersection of culture and communication, just like, I guess, in that studies when we met in intercultural communication. Or do you want to elaborate a little bit more what it actually means?
I mean, it's really funny because I'm one of the few people that I know that studied intercultural communication and adult education and now works with adults around the topics of intercultural communication. So it's very consistent in a way. But I teach at two universities here in Wrocław. I teach intercultural communication. And I will soon do a seminar also at the University of Erfurt on intercultural training design. And I do most of my work is around the topics of intercultural trainings, sometimes culture-specific trainings around Germany or Poland, but very often just generally how do you work and operate in intercultural settings. But now that's also got a little bit expanded around topics such as leadership or management or talking candidly with people in a way that is building relationships and not hurting them. And also designing learning processes for companies that are not very good at doing that, or for organizations that are a bit stuck in some formal processes. I can help them in developing launch events for projects or conferences that are actually engaging and interesting and fun.
Okay, and you travel quite a bit, I think, no, for your work?
Yeah, not as much as others in my field, but I do have a frequent traveler card, which may or may not be an indicator of how much I travel. But I travel enough so that I don't feel stuck where I am, but I don't travel so much that I don't get to spend time with my family.
Yes, and this would be something else I wanted to add, that you are also a dad to two lovely daughters.
Yes, I have two daughters and I have a really great wife who you've spoken to as well. So, yes.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So the subject of integrity is quite complex, I guess, or huge, you could call it, or at least I started to do this podcast or these conversations because I love the word, or I love the concept of integrity. For me, it feels really like kind of what we are striving for in a way as humans, but at the same time, it's also something I think we might never achieve fully. And also, I think for many people, it's quite an abstract concept, or the word is not very easy to use maybe, or easy to access for many. And so I've started these conversations because I am curious to find out more about this and to elaborate a little bit around the subject, and to hear what other people than myself, how they live with this concept or how they conceptualize it, for example.
So what does it mean for you, and why do you think one might never achieve it?
For me, it means being whole, or I actually learned recently it means being unhurt or unversehrt.
Yeah.
So, well, that's why I also, for example, I don't only ask if what you do for work, but I also mention that you have daughters, because it's part of who you also are. And I don't only tell what you do today, but I also want to say where we met and how, like, make a bigger picture in a way of you as a whole person, or myself as a whole person.
Yep.
For me also, of course, the body is always quite interesting. So I will also ask you about that later. And I think whether or not we achieve it, it depends on how we conceptualize it. Because if part of being whole is, okay, I'm human, I do get sick, I make mistakes, I fuck up, I regret, I like do all these things that are also part of it, then of course I'm always in integrity.
Yeah.
Always, like even when it feels like, damn it, I messed up. But often the first thing we think about when we talk about integrity is the moral aspect of, okay, how do I integrate my values into how I live? Or so I find I guess the interesting aspect is to see where these, like the values, or our values, where we meet them, and where they are very much an intention, and we are still humans and not supernatural beings that can at all times be in line with all of their different values, and sometimes we need to choose. Yeah.
All right.
How's that for an answer?
That's a pretty good answer. It's actually quite funny, because last weekend we had the biannual Congress of CETAR Polska, which is the Society for Intercultural Education, Training and Research, where I'm a member of the board of CETAR Polska. Mm-hmm. And we had invited a guest speaker, a really, really interesting woman from Chicago. And in her keynote presentation, she actually mentioned integrity, because the theme of the Congress was integration. Mm-hmm. But not only integration in the sense of how do you integrate migrants into a host society, for example, or how do you integrate someone into your life or something, but how do you integrate two ideas with each other that may normally not be thought of as fitting with each other, right?
Nice.
So a little bit of a larger view on what integration actually is and what it means. And so when she spoke about this, she said that integration and integrity have the same root, and that the opposite of integrity is fragility. Uh-huh. And that really resonated with me, because you can also think of integrity in terms of structural integrity, right? When you have a building, you need to have structural integrity for it to not fall down.
Yes.
Right? In a very plain sense, right? Mm-hmm. Things need to have an internal integrity in order to be stable.
Yes.
And in order to be strong. Yeah. And the opposite of that is fragility. And there's a lot of fragility right now in the world, right? There's masculine fragility, there is like a lot of negativity that we experience in the world right now. I think it comes from a place of fragility, where people are not secure in their sense of connection with where they're from, that they defend it so violently that it leads to nationalism, for example, where we have, like a lot of the Me Too movement, I think, shines a very clear light on a lot of masculine fragility that needs female subordination or objectification of women to have a sense of power when it comes to the sense of masculinity, for example. But we also have this fragility in many, many other places when it comes to power games in companies, or when it comes to international politics, right? Or just national politics. Switch on the news and you'll see a lot of fragility.
Yeah. Yes, I do.
So if integrity is the opposite of fragility, then I think what it would mean for me is that you're okay with who you are, and that the inconsistencies inside of you, or the places where you hold two opposing views at the same time, they don't cause you imbalance, or they don't cause you to feel this sense of disorientation or the sense of instability, but that you're able to hold that, right? And that for me would be integrity, that you're able to feel different things in different moments, in different places about the same thing, right? Where you may be against judging people, but when you watch Donald Trump on the news, you're totally fine with judging him, right? And that's okay, you know. When or in my case, when I want to be a great father, but I'm totally fine of being really happy when I walk away from the school, when I brought my kids to school in the morning, because I'm not going to see them for a couple of hours, right? That's fine too, you know, because you need to have both. And when I can be at the same time sometimes really happy about my professional choices and sometimes really stressed because of those same professional choices, right? That it's that those different thoughts that they don't cancel each other out, but that they enrich each other in a way, and that hopefully in the long term that leads to like a sense of stability from within that doesn't require stability without to have a sense of stability from within. But that's really difficult to achieve very often, unfortunately.
So would you, are there moments in your everyday life that you can identify where it's easier or where it's more challenging to achieve this?
It's easy for me to achieve this when I am in my comfort zone, in the sense of I'm in a training room, or I'm in a classroom at the university, and I do my work and I do it really well, and I get a lot of positive feedback for it, and I earn money with it, and I can bring my personality into it, and it's welcome, and I can make jokes and people laugh. And I can say something really smart and people go, oh. You know? When all of that happens at the same time, I feel very integer, right? I feel really strong in being my holistic self there. It's a lot harder in moments when like there isn't enough work to feel stable, or it's a lot harder when I wrote a proposal or an offer for a client and it gets rejected. You know, those are the moments where you think like, ah, fuck, like I wish I had a jobby job, you know, where you probably also deal with rejection there, but at least you get a monthly salary regardless. And in my case, rejection is part of the job, but it also always comes with it's always coupled with a rejection of future income too. And that, you know, that really sucks.
So is it in a way the moments when your livelihood is threatened, even though it's maybe not immediately, but it's in a way.
Yeah, exactly. When 2 or 3 or 4 different roles get like pinched at the same time, like it's not only, okay, my proposal wasn't good enough, or my price wasn't good enough, or I wasn't competent enough, like that is like the professional identity, but it's also that, oh, but you know, I have a mortgage to pay, and I have, you know, like school fee to pay for the school that my kids go to, and I have food to provide for my children, and maybe I want to buy something nice for me sometimes, you know, like it's these different accountabilities to different parts of my identity that in such moments they all get tackled at the same time, and that's unfortunate. You know? It's easier to get a negative evaluation after a training, but I know I'm going to get paid for it anyway, than to not even have a chance to write an invoice for something.
And in even smaller everyday moments, like throughout the day, do you ever experience kind of like, this didn't, like there was this thing that didn't fit with how I actually think? Like you already mentioned the Donald Trump example as one where you managed to keep your integrity, although you're going against one of your core values, but like moments where this doesn't, even though it happens, it feels kind of weird or
yeah, maybe when I make an effort to cook something nice for the kids and then the kids don't want to eat it. And it feels like, okay, why do I even bother? Why do I even make an effort? But I want to be the kind of dad that makes an effort, but I also want to be the kind of dad that makes an effort and then everybody's happy about it, you know? And that is then difficult to not slip into it, and you know what, fuck it, like just eat toast, I don't care. Like
ketchup.
Yes, exactly. Then just be unhealthy. But it's yeah, those are moments where kind of my ambitions on who I want to be as a dad and sometimes who I am as a dad are not you know, not always the same. Not to the same standards. But that's okay.
So do you have a physical sensation that you connect to this sense of being in integrity, or also a sensation that you feel what that relates in some way to moments when you're like not well, feeling a bit fragile, I guess, or not so strong?
I'm a quite brainy person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you know. But I guess when I feel I am in integrity, I feel very energized mentally. Like I have a lot of ideas and I want to talk about stuff that excites me. And I get, like recently I got into neuroscience and I could, talk for hours about it. It's great. And, put me in front of the people and give me a topic that I'm excited about to talk about. And I'm going to, be full of energy and not get tired. And I think in the hardest moments of fragility, in my childhood, I stuttered a lot. Mm-hmm. And I learned how to not stutter through breathing techniques and so on. But in the moments when I am not in integrity, that's probably one of the surest signs for me that I need to pay attention to myself, is when I realize that I'm stuttering more and more. Mm-hmm. So that's a very strong physical side. But other than that, like maybe I get a stiff neck from stress or something like that, or back pain.
Mm-hmm. And so stress is feeling the kind of restlessness or kind of
no, not restlessness. It's more a need to distract and to drown out those self-doubting voices with YouTube videos about cooking or something like that.
So this would be my next question. Do you have a practice that, well, maybe not drown out, but that you use when you feel like, when you start to notice, okay, there's something where I'm stressed, or there's something where I'm not really in integrity, and I want to go back to that state, or I want to expand again my capacity to hold both, or all three, or how many ever things are fighting for attention in you?
In times of really big stress, I meditate. Mm-hmm. I don't do it when I'm not. But that's kind of a good way for me to kind of listen to that inner monologue and just give it a room. So I don't have a strong practice of that, but it's something that I do when I feel like, okay, I need it. And
specific kind of meditation?
Yeah, like sitting on a pillow and concentrating on my breathing.
Okay.
And it's a meditation pillow, so it's it's designed for that. So when you sit on that pillow, it's
already happening.
It's already like, it's labeled. You're meditating now. No, and there's some nice Spotify meditation guides that can help measure those 20 minutes and just hear someone say, okay, concentrate on your breathing right now, and so on, in a voice that's not too creepy, because because some of those guided meditations, you just feel like that person is really, really excited about themselves, talking people through a guided meditation, and it's not helpful. I also really enjoy to go running when I'm stressed. Mm-hmm. That I also do when I'm not stressed, particularly when it's nice weather. So now I will go to a gym that has a roof.
What?
A roof.
A roof, yeah.
Because it's starting to get colder, and I'm not, I'm not that crazy. Also, there's a sauna afterwards, so that's nice too. Very nice. But yeah, I feel like moving with the body and kind of releasing those stress hormones through physical exercises is helpful. And because I am a bit of a brainy person, I also really enjoy understanding how physical exercise can like calm down the amygdala that is releasing a stress response into the nervous system. And so it's helpful for me to understand the mechanics of what's happening in my body and how my body is governed by, neurotransmitters and hormonal levels and glucocorticoids that get ever since I was a small child, I loved these TV shows. In German it's Sendung mit der Maus or Wissen macht A, these TV shows that I now enjoy watching with my kids about that explain how stuff works, right, and how stuff gets made. And I've watched a Lord of the Rings maybe 3 or 4 times. I've watched the making of Lord of the Rings 5 or 6 or 7 times because I enjoy that almost more than the actual movie. And the same is true with my body and my psyche, is that understanding things like biases or mental models or frames or on how the prefrontal cortex interacts with the limbic system and how that interacts with the hypothalamus and how that interacts with hormonal levels in the body and how that reacts with, dopamine levels.
How does that feel when you understand?
It demystifies what's happening.
So how does that feel?
Like that you, not necessarily that you have control, but that's kind of that's normal, that it provides the self-distance that maybe meditation can also provide, where you can kind of just observe your own mind in both the metaphorical and the physical sense. Right, where you can say, look at that, I'm thinking this thought now, isn't that interesting? This is kind of what you do in meditation, but the same is true when you say, look at that, my amygdala is having increased activity right now, and it evaluates the threat level of my environment and sets stress signals into my spinal cord.
So is it a little bit like it creates a sense of order or structure in your thinking also, or kind of stillness in your thinking, that before, when you don't understand, it's more chaos? Or
no, not stillness. It's more a sense of isn't that funnily human what's happening right now?
It sounds like a relief somehow.
Yeah, it's like look at that, the lizard brain is having a party right now, and the mammal brain is joining in, but the AP part of my brain doesn't quite catch up yet, and is not able to interact with that yet, but maybe at some point my prefrontal cortex will get a say. It's nice to, like, humans are very funny, right? And yeah, humans are weird, but also beautifully weird. And so it's nice to remind yourself sometimes that you're at the same time just a human being, while at the same time this marvelous human being, full of this uniqueness that humans have in this, on this planet. while at the same time also being, you know, just a big ape.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah, it's so magical, weird, and profound and random at the same time.
Yeah, and the fact that we even think about this and that we even have these thoughts, that it's, you know, these evaluatory thoughts that, like, isn't that great or weird or wonderful or marvelous or magical or whatever, like even that is just us being humans, you know.
My last question that I prepared
Okay.
is always if you have any kind of tool or practice or resource or something that you would like to share with people listening that they could experiment with or explore if they are in a moment of this fragility and like looking for how can I like regain the sense of integrity, something that has worked for you, not because maybe it's the best and the only thing in the world, but because it's worked for you, it might be interesting for others to play with.
I think seeking out a place where you're safe, both physically and psychologically, is a good starting point, right? And that can be the arms of the person that loves you. That can be therapy. That can be a coach. That can be out in the forest running. Like, I don't know what that's for you, but to be in that place and just to be in that place for a moment and know that you're safe, that can really calm down all of these stress responses. And that can be very, very useful. And to allow yourself to be vulnerable and fragile and not okay is very helpful to start being okay, you know? And then also to seek out moments where you are competent is probably a good idea. And if that doesn't work on a large scale, maybe it works on a small scale. So to seek out moments when you are like strong and stable and knowledgeable and kind of in charge. I think that can be helpful too. Yeah.
Great. One last thought I have.
Okay.
Coming back to my mind. It's not really about integrity, or maybe it is, because when I asked you about the body situation, your first answer was that you're a very brainy person. And I know you are, but also in all the things that you are telling, you love to cook, you love to run, you love to create silence, and like you talk about the stress things. I think there's a lot more than your brain involved in your life than your.
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't love to run. I find running quite boring.
You just do it anyway.
Yeah, but it's sometimes good to do something that you know is good for you, and then to work through that boredom, because at some point it becomes interesting. But in the beginning, I could really nothing happening. Particularly when you do it indoors in one of those treadmill things, that's the worst. Like, that's horrible.
But the thing that you like about it is how you feel afterwards, no?
Yeah. But I do consider the brain part of the body. Right? So I think even if you do work with your brain,
yeah, it's great. Like, I mean, it's lovely to hear you say that.
And it does interact with the rest of the body, and the body is a really interesting sensory organ that transmit information up to the brain where it gets processed and evaluated. But I mean, a body without a brain is not very useful.
How is a brain without a body?
Yeah, also not very useful. So kind of useful, probably. I mean, depends on how much of the body, right? A brain without a foot still works really well. Foot without a brain, because it's where all the nervous system go up and get processed. Anyway, I think, like, what I love about cooking, for example, is that it does involve so many things. Like, it does involve dexterity in terms of knife skills. It does involve tasting. It does involve the eyes to see how things are changing and developing. It does involve the ears listening to how the sound in the pan goes from, like when you put a bunch of mushrooms in there and the water from within the mushrooms evaporate. That's a different sound than when the water has evaporated and they start frying. You can hear how that changes, and it's great. But I like to think about these things, right? Like these things or these sensations become richer after a reflection about them. And for me, trying to understand the structure behind the story doesn't make the story less meaningful, but more meaningful, right? When I can see in the making of Lord of the Rings, for example, how they build the costumes, or how they build the miniatures, and how that is then being worked with camera angles that it looks like a real thing, and so on. And when I then see the movie, it's not that I think, oh wow, they tricked me into thinking that this is a real building. It's more like, wow, I think it's a real building, but it's not, and that's incredible, and that's, I really love that. And I also love to watch a movie and understand where in the structure of the story we are right now, and what needs to happen for that to make sense. And then that happens, and it's great. And it doesn't diminish my emotional response to it. It makes it stronger.
I guess understanding can also be a tool to come back to integrity, because it can give us like something to hold on to in this, like, wow, why do I think both this and that and that? And sometimes it's, we don't yet understand, and then it's maybe a bit more challenging to still hold both of it within ourselves, but it is possible. And sometimes we can understand, and then it can be like, okay, this is how it fits together.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk with you about this.
It was.
And see you again some other time.
We will.